Phill Schneider was born on April 23, 1947 at Bethesda Naval Hospital. His father, Oscar Otto Schneider, was a captain in the U.S. Navy. He was involved with both the Philadelphia experiment and Operation Crossroads. 7 months after Schneider began speaking out, he was found dead in his apartment in Oregon. The coroner ruled the death a suicide. Schneider once stated that if anyone claimed he had committed suicide, then you would know he was murdered. Schneider is survived by his ex-wife Cynthia Dreyer and his daughter Marie. Now, for the first time, Cynthia and Marie sit down with open minds, and in this exclusive interview, they discuss the man who was at one time a husband and father who made some astonishing claims about the U.S. government and extraterrestrials that put all involved under intense scrutiny.
Toward the end of his life, the last 2 years, he was out on the lecture tour, and he had pretty good memories of everything that he had done, all the events that occurred, and he had new materials that he had discovered in his father's basement. He talked more about Morse and Knudsen, that they were a military contractor. They were civilian, but they contracted with the military. And so a lot of what he talked about was the deep underground mountain bases that he dug for the government all over the world. I mean, it wasn't just the United States. But he also mentioned Groom Lake, Area 51, S4, whatever you want to call it. He was a structural engineer. And he was an expert on explosives. So he was the person that helped to build the long shafts down into the deep underground mountain bases. He witnessed those and the monorail system that they had between the different dumb bases, and talked about how fast they were. You could go from New York to Los Angeles really fast. But the purpose of the deep underground mountain bases is the part that really concerned him, that there was a treaty with aliens that they'd be able to live underground in peace, I guess is kind of how you would put it. I think he was concerned about the alien agenda. He wanted the abductions to stop with the aliens. He wanted our children to be safe. And having a daughter of his own, he feared for her and feared for all the children, that it was generational. A person who says they're abducted, that their children were probably going to be abducted as well. He indicated that they were making the explosions for the shaft, and they came to an area where they knew the explosions weren't right, that there was probably already a cavern there. So they went down along with probably 26 other people, and that's when they came upon the Draco type of alien. It's a reptilian type. There was an altercation. In the end, Philip was hit by a blue cobalt beam that split open his chest. Philip mentioned that there had been a treaty that the aliens could abduct humans for experimentation, but they had to give the United States a copy of who they abducted so that they would know who was being experimented on. And it had to be kind of limited. It couldn't be just a whole lot of people. So it had to be a specific number, maybe per year, and it had to be maybe generational, just certain families that they could look at. And in exchange for that, they would give us some of their technologies, and we would provide them with a safe space to live, like in the deep underground mountain bases. And the treaty was broken. We found out that there were millions more people being abducted than were being given to the government. Of course, that was real concerning, because then the government didn't have as much control. I think the government wanted to go back in, take the people that had been abducted, do some experiments on them to see what the aliens had done. You know, now they couldn't do that. They didn't know who had been taken.
About a week before Schneider's death, he was in Seattle securing plans for a book that would include everything from his lectures as well as other information. Cynthia felt something was not quite right about his death and asked the funeral director to investigate further.
So he said he would take a look at the body, and I left. The very next day, I got a call from the police. They were taking his body to the medical examiners, and that the funeral director had found something on his neck. It turned out to be a catheter tube that had been wound 3 times around his neck and tied in the front. Now, Philip had osteoporosis, he had multiple sclerosis, he had cancer, he had so many things, but on top of that, he was missing some fingers on one of his hands. To do that 3 times around your head and then tie it in the knot, and then just sit on the edge of your bed and drop dead did not make sense to me at all. It definitely was not a stroke. And in my mind, it was a murder, and I knew things were missing from his apartment. But the coroner, when she did the medical examination, couldn't find anything of a fight. There was no fight, no marks of him scratching people, no obvious sign of him being murdered. So they called it a suicide.
Schneider's daughter Marie told us that she is still missing something that would give her some sense of closure.
Justice. Same thing that my mom said, the death certificate being changed to at least unknown, because it's so unjustified right now, and it's sad.
Marie, who now has children of her own, also expressed that she misses her father greatly and still carries concerns from what had happened. She will make sure that he will not be forgotten.
There's a fear, yeah, but I don't let it get to me. I know when my children get older, they'll know about their grandpa.
So what is it about this area of New Mexico that has created such mystery? What is it about this place in America that would cause someone with a PhD in education to abandon his life in Florida and move to Dulce, New Mexico?
So I took an early retirement from my position as a college professor in Miami to come out to where the hot spot is. I had a choice of either going to Roswell or to Aztec, but Dulce is the place where it's currently happening, and that's why I'm here, to find out whatever I could and to immerse myself completely into this arena. Early on in my life, maybe 4 or 5 years of age, my sister, who was younger, was abducted. And she's had repeated abduction experiences throughout her life. And I vowed to her and to myself that I would do whatever I possibly could to find out the truth, whatever that might be.
Howard Eliason experienced all of this around the age of 5, and the memory of this first incident with his sister will never leave him.
We lived along the Delaware River, and the fellows that were putting up the television antennas above our house, we were out in the middle of nowhere, called my mother and myself out to see what was going on. There were 5 UFOs, they were light bulb shapes above the house. They hovered, I don't know, but they were very low, and they put out the angel hair, like the spun glass, fiberglass. It covered everything, the trees, the house, everything. We were frozen, and out of my peripheral vision, I saw my sister, baby sister, levitated out of the window, and that was it. And just to fill the story a little bit further, as we got older then, she was telling me of her repeated abduction experiences, and the type that were taking her were the reptilians.
Eliason has always felt a calling to talk about his experiences, but it wasn't until his later years that he felt the confidence to speak out. In fact, at the time of this exclusive Open Minds interview, it was his only on-camera interview, and for a very good reason.
I wasn't always this way. I had this obsession, so to speak, and this calling towards this topic. And yet, when you're younger, you'd rather be dead than be different. And I wasn't any different than anybody else. It was only when I get into the stage of life where it really doesn't matter anymore whether people understand it or not. And also at this stage of life, I'm very careful as to who I speak to about these things. The History Channel was up in the area last year, I guess it was, and they approached me twice. Well, they didn't come to me. They wanted to get in touch with me, and people who knew that I was interested in this sort of thing told them, well, that they might want to contact me. They were really interested in doing that. But I avoided them. Anytime I saw anybody coming up the driveway, I didn't want to be involved. Why? Because I don't want the people in this area, excuse me, I don't want the people in this area to think that I was ever an opportunist. Forgive me with this. The people around here have been marvelous to me. And they're genuinely nice people, and I would never want anybody to think that I moved up into this area to take advantage of anything that they've ever told me or anything that I've experienced or seen. I wouldn't want to do that to betray the people in this area. And that's why I never wanted to have anything to do, even with the UFO conferences that I never attended. It took me a while to get over the perception that I was the UFO nut, because going around with Gabe Valdez, automatically you think, well, he's either into UFOs or cattle mutilations or what have you. So, but I just didn't want to be labeled as a UFO nut, but most importantly, I didn't want to ever betray the people in this community. I found more than I've ever expected. There are aliens. I believe that people either have to believe this or not. I believe what I've seen are clones, not actually aliens, but clones of human beings. I've seen the sophisticated craft, UFO, whatever you want to call them. I've seen them with the naked eye. I've seen them with the digital photography. You name it. And I've seen, as we perhaps have talked before, about the light beings. Now, not many people have ever experienced this. I've never really heard anybody talk about this except myself. Light beings that seem to be, they must be miles high. And so I've seen that, and that has been the most fascinating things that I've experienced. And seeing UFOs make clouds, emerge from clouds, disappear before my eyes. Anything that you've imagined and read about, I've really seen it.
Two of Elias's neighbors and longtime residents of Dulce sat down with open minds and told us that what Eliason has expressed is normal for the Dulce area.
They're just here. We see them all the time. It's just an everyday part of life here. People need to know that there's the Dulce and Lumberton is a hotspot for UFOs, and there is something going on here, and it does need to be investigated, I believe, because for all we know, this could be part of our future that's going on here. You know what I mean? That it's like, I don't know, maybe they're here to help us or something. You never know, man. I don't know.
I do believe there's a base here. There is some, there's just too much going on. There's things that, you know, the way the planes go, activity at night. I haven't really seen any vehicles, military per se, but it's here.
Whether anyone believes all or part of any of the stories from cattle mutilations done by extraterrestrials or alien fights underground, or even from the recants of alien abduction, no one can dispute the fact that Dulce is surrounded with mystery. And with Kirtland Air Force Base and Los Alamos National Laboratories just a few hundred miles away, there is also little doubt that a military influence could be the cause of some of the accounts and speculations. As for the future of the Dulce area, Open Minds will be keeping a watchful eye open and our ears to the ground and ready to investigate any abnormality that may spark our interest. This has been an Open Mind special report on the myths, legends, and truths that surround Dulce, New Mexico.